Hi again, everyone. Welcome back to Timeless Testimonies. Today we're continuing on in the Testimony for the Church in Volume 5, page 654. It's called The Nature and Influence of the Testimonies. We're in the section subtitled Personal Testimonies. It begins on page 657. Before we continue on, we want to review what this testimony is about. It's a pretty long testimony, so as we said, we're going to have several different videos on it. So I just want to introduce it again by reading the first paragraph from the beginning of the testimony. And here's what she writes. As the end draws near and the work of giving the last warning to the world extends, it becomes more important for those who accept present truth to have a clear understanding of the nature and influence of the testimonies. Now I'm just going to pause there. The sentence continues, but I don't want that to be missed. The reason for this particular testimony is so that those who accept present truth can have a clear understanding of the nature and influence of the testimonies. So please keep that in mind as we're reading through this. This is designed to explain how the testimonies have come about and what their influence is supposed to be. The last of that paragraph reads like this. In the following pages are given extracts from what I have written during the last 40 years relating to my own early experience in this special work, and also presenting what God has shown me concerning the nature and importance of the testimonies, the manner in which they are given, and how they should be regarded. So notice, she's saying here that these things are what God has shown her. So God showed her the nature and importance of the testimonies. He showed to her the manner in which they are given, and he showed her how they should be regarded. So we're going to keep that in mind as we continue on. So picking up on page 657, she continues writing, and here's what she says. The messages given me for different individuals, I often wrote out for them, in many cases doing this at their urgent request. As my work extended, this became an important and taxing part of my labors. Before the publication of Testimony 15, many requests for written testimonies were sent me by those whom I had counseled or reproved, but I was in a state of great exhaustion from wearing labor, and I shrank from the task, especially since I knew that many of these persons were very unworthy, and there seemed little hope that the warnings given would work any decided change in them. At that time, I was greatly encouraged by the following dream. Okay, so first, I'll just mention that Testimony 15 that she's referring to here is the first testimony that we find in Volume 2. So if you want to go back and look for that and kind of see what was happening at that time. Also reading the introduction that the publishers wrote out in the beginning of the volume might be helpful to just kind of get an overview of the period of time that is dealt with all the testimonies that were written in Volume 2, just to kind of get an idea of what was happening. So again, Ellen White is saying here that she's written a lot of testimonies to people at their request, and she, this was a heavy burden for her. And she was pretty well discouraged in how some of the testimonies were received. But at that time, God gave her a dream that really, really encouraged her. So I found this dream to be very encouraging as well, and I hope that you will too. So we're going to read what that dream was next. She writes, a person brought to me a web of white cloth and bade me cut it into garments for persons of all sizes, and all descriptions of character and circumstances in life. I was told to cut them out and hang them up all ready to be made when called for. I had the impression that many for whom I was required to cut garments were unworthy. I inquired if that was the last piece of cloth I should have to cut, and was told that it was not. That as soon as I had finished this one, there were others for me to take hold of. I felt discouraged at the amount of work before me, and stated that I had been engaged in cutting garments for others for more than 20 years, and my labors had not been appreciated, neither did I see that my work had accomplished much good. I spoke to the person who brought the cloth to me of one woman in particular, for whom he had told me to cut a garment. I stated that she would not prize the garment, and that it would be a loss of time and material to present it to her. She was very poor, of inferior intellect, and untidy in her habits, and would soon soil it. The person replied, "Cut out the garments. That is your duty. The loss is not yours, but mine. God sees not as man sees. He lays out the work that he would have done, and you do not know which will prosper, this or that." I then held up my hands, calloused as they were with long use of the shears, and stated that I could but shrink at the thought of pursuing this kind of labor. The person again repeated, "Cut out the garments. Your release has not yet come." With feelings of great weariness, I arose to engage in the work. Before me lay new polished shears, which I commenced using. At once, my feelings of weariness and discouragement left me. The shears seemed to cut with hardly an effort on my part, and I cut out garment after garment with comparative ease. That dream was taken from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, pages 10 to 12, first published in 1868. Okay, so that was the dream, and you can see why it was very encouraging for her. I mean, she'd been working hard for a long time, and a lot of her efforts seemed to go completely unappreciated and didn't seem to be doing any good. But this person in her dream told her, first of all, that she was just to do her duty. The loss wasn't hers, it was God's. Well, actually, the person says the loss is not yours, but mine. So that's what it actually said. But continuing on, once she just took up the work that she was told to do, her weariness immediately left. And she had been provided with these polished shears. It made the job really easy, and she was able to just do it with relative ease, is how she put it, I believe. So with comparative ease, that's what it was. But I wanted to relate something else to you that I hope is encouraging. I found it to be very encouraging for myself. I was a little surprised. I've read The Desire of Ages a few times, and this never really stood out to me before. But on page 678, paragraph 3, here's what Ellen White writes about Jesus. As the world's Redeemer, Christ was constantly confronted with apparent failure. He, the messenger of mercy to our world, seemed to do little of the work he longed to do in uplifting and saving. Satanic influences were constantly working to oppose his way, but he would not be discouraged. Through the prophecy of Isaiah, he declares, "I have labored in vain, I have spent my strength for naught and in vain. Yet surely my judgment is with the Lord, and my work with my God." Isaiah 49, verse 4. "Though Israel be not gathered, yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength." Isaiah 49, verse 5. It is to Christ that the promise is given. "Thus saith the Lord, the Redeemer of Israel, and his Holy One, to him whom man despiseth, to him whom the nation abhorreth. Thus saith the Lord, I will preserve thee, and give thee for a covenant of the people, to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages, that thou mayest say to the prisoners, Go forth. To them that are in darkness, show yourselves. They shall not hunger nor thirst, neither shall the heat nor sun smite them. For he that hath mercy on them shall lead them, even by the springs of water shall he guide them. Isaiah 49, verses 7 to 10. How many of you, I wonder, have noticed that before? And maybe several of you have. But in looking through this testimony, I came across that and I thought, man, what a perfect fitting place to share that. Christ, as the world's Redeemer, was constantly confronted with apparent failure. But look at the world around us. Look at how his message has spread and is spreading. It still needs to spread more, but everyone knows who Christ was. Everyone knows. And he was just a laborer from Nazareth. So I can see why Ellen White was so encouraged by the dream that she was given, and I found this very encouraging as well. Now, one other thing I wanted to share from Christ's Object Lessons, page 65, paragraph 1, in regard to how the person in her dream told her, hey, you don't know what's going to prosper, this or that. So this deals with that. Here's what she writes. The good seed may for a time lie unnoticed in a cold, selfish, worldly heart, giving no evidence that it has taken root. But afterward, as the Spirit of God breathes on the soul, the hidden seed springs up, and at last bears fruit to the glory of God. In our life work, we know not which shall prosper, this or that. This is not a question for us to settle. We are to do our work and leave the results with God. Quote, in the morning sow thy seed, and in the evening withhold not thine hand. Ecclesiastes 11, verse 6. God's great covenant declares that while the earth remaineth, seed time and harvest shall not cease. Genesis 8:22. In the confidence of this promise, the husbandman tills and sows. Not less confidently are we in the spiritual sowing to labor, trusting his assurance, quote, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. Isaiah 55, verse 11. Quote, he that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. Psalm 126, verse 6. So another wonderfully encouraging statement, and it needs a little comment. So moving on, Ellen White then continues to share another excerpt from a testimony from much earlier, and here's what she writes. There are many dreams arising from the common things of life with which the Spirit of God has nothing to do. There are also false dreams, as well as false visions, which are inspired by the spirit of Satan. But dreams from the Lord are classed in the Word of God with visions, and are as truly the fruits of the Spirit of prophecy as visions. Such dreams, taking into the account the persons who have them, and the circumstances under which they are given, contain their own proofs of their genuineness. That was from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, page 569. Now, I find it interesting that she included that particular statement from Volume 1 of the Testimonies. And it appears that not everybody really had a lot of confidence in her dreams and, for her visions, for that matter, too. They didn't always receive them as from God. But here she's just explaining that dreams can be, as long as they are given by God, can be just as revelation or just as inspired as a vision given by God, so long as it is given by God. But that she's acknowledging there's false dreams too. There's things that you can dream that just have absolutely no significance at all. It's not that every dream is significant, although a lot of times, we might tend to think that way. But it's also not that every dream is a false dream. We just have to know the source of the dream or the vision and understand what it's promoting. If it's promoting righteousness, then it is truth. And if it's not promoting righteousness, then we can know that it's not from God. But continuing on in the testimony, she writes this: since the warning and instruction given in testimony for individual cases applied with equal force to many others who had not been specially pointed out in this manner, it seemed to be my duty to publish the personal testimonies for the benefit of the church. In Testimony 15, speaking of the necessity for doing this, I said, I know of no better way to present my views of general dangers and errors, and the duty of all who love God and keep His commandments, than by giving these testimonies. Perhaps there is no more direct and forcible way of presenting what the Lord has shown me. That was Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, page 9. Continuing on, in a vision given me June 12, 1868, I was shown that which fully justified my course in publishing personal testimonies. When the Lord singles out individual cases and specifies their wrongs, others who have not been shown in vision frequently take it for granted that they are right, or nearly so. If one is reproved for a special wrong, brethren and sisters should carefully examine themselves to see wherein they have failed and wherein they have been guilty of the same sin. They should possess the spirit of humble confession. If others think them right, it does not make them so. God looks at the heart. He is proving and testing souls in this manner. In rebuking the wrongs of one, He designs to correct many. But if they fail to take the reproof to themselves, and flatter themselves that God passes over their errors because He does not especially single them out, they deceive their own souls and will be shut up in darkness and be left to their own ways to follow the imagination of their own hearts. Many are dealing falsely with their own souls and are in a great deception in regard to their true condition before God. He employs ways and means to best serve His purpose and to prove what is in the hearts of His professed followers. He makes plain the wrongs of some, that others may thus be warned and fear and shun those errors. By self-examination, they may find that they are doing the same things which God condemns in others. If they really desire to serve God and fear to offend Him, they will not wait for their sins to be specified before they make confession and with humble repentance return unto the Lord. They will forsake the things which have displeased God according to the light given to others. If, on the contrary, those who are not right see that they are guilty of the very sins that have been reproved in others, yet continue in the same unconsecrated course because they have not been specially named, they endanger their own souls and will be led captive by Satan at his will. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, pages 112 and 113. Now, I've actually done a video on that specific testimony already. It can be found on the channel here. The title is Object of Personal Testimonies, and I'll have a link for you to find it easily. I won't go over it now because I've already got another video on that, so you can just check that out to review that particular section of the testimony that we're reading now. So moving on, I was shown that in the wisdom of God, the sins and errors of all would not be revealed. All who are guilty are addressed in these individual testimonies, although their names may not be attached to the special testimony borne. And if individuals pass over and cover up their own sins because their names are not especially called, they will not be prospered of God. They cannot advance in the divine life, but will become darker and darker until the light of heaven will be entirely withdrawn. That was taken from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, page 447. So again, she's still continuing to explain how we need to be taking these testimonies, self-examining to see if they apply to us, and not pass over our own sins just because we haven't been especially named, just because we haven't received a letter that says, hey, Teresa, that's my name. Hey, Teresa, this applies to you. Well, if it's there and I can read it, I can ask myself and I can ask God to show me if it applies to me. So that's how we should regard these. So moving on. In a view given me about 20 years ago, I was then directed to bring out general principles in speaking and in writing, and at the same time specify the dangers, errors, and sins of some individuals, that all might be warned, reproved, and counseled. I saw that all should search their own hearts and lives closely to see if they had not made the same mistakes for which others were corrected, and if the warnings given for others did not apply to their own cases. If so, they should feel that the counsel and reproofs were given especially for them, and should make as practical an application of them as though they were especially addressed to themselves. God designs to test the faith of all who claim to be followers of Christ. He will test the sincerity of the prayers of all those who claim to earnestly desire to know their duty. He will make duty plain. He will give all an ample opportunity to develop what is in their hearts. That's taken from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 2, page 687. So there we have this section of the testimony, and we can start to see more and more how she's wanting to put across that the testimonies were given to us by God through her, and they were given to reprove the wrongs of everyone, even though not everyone would have their sins especially pointed out. But that we have the opportunity to read these testimonies and apply them to ourselves and take the counsel offered so that we can learn the truth about ourselves and we can see what is in our hearts that shuts out Jesus. So I hope this has been a blessing. We'll try to get to the next video soon covering the next section. And in the meantime, thank you for investigating along with me, and I hope that you're all blessed. Shalom.